Hi, all. So let's see, let's let them all in. Hi. Welcome, everyone, to UCGIS Week 2022. To the session GIS and Health. My name is Amy Work, and I'm your moderator for the session today. I also have Danielle Kane, who is a helper, and Carlos Bajarona is the Zoom host. We have a great lineup today. If you have any questions, go ahead and place them in the chat. Depending on the time we have, we'll have about we have three speakers for the session. We have Heather, Bailey, and Anand. And we'll go ahead and go through. Each one will have about 20 minutes. If they're in that time, we can have questions. If not, we'll hold questions to the end, but feel free to add them to the chat during. And at the end, if there is time, we'll also allow you to unmute yourself to ask questions at the end. So without further ado, thank you for joining. You also have the ability to follow along in the Slack channel, so the TGIS and Health. And there's also sort of the Twitter handle. You'll be getting a survey at the end of the session, but I'll let each speaker go ahead and introduce themselves and their topic, and we'll go ahead and get started. So Heather, I'll go ahead and let you share your screen and take it from there.
Awesome, thank you. All right, can everyone see this?
Yes, we can.
Cool. All right, so hi everyone, I'm Heather Chou, and I'm a fourth-year undergraduate student from UCLA, majoring in geography and minoring in both GIS and public health. And so today I'm really excited to show you all a project I worked on over this past summer as an intern for the GIS company known as Esri. And as a GIS consultant intern in the Health and Human Services team, I was to develop a final capstone project that would allow me to leverage the power of both desktop and web GIS and apply GIS consulting skills in a public health focused scenario. Because this is a lengthy story map, I will not go too much into the details and will continue scrolling, but will highlight some key points throughout. So part of this project involved understanding my client and their goals and the ways that they achieve these goals. And for this project, I chose to collaborate with UCLA's Asian Pacific American Healthcare, or APA for short, which is a healthcare organization I have been with since my freshman year, and it's made up of undergraduate students and students from UCLA's nursing, medical, and public health professional schools. As a quick background of APA's work in promoting increased health access to culturally competent health services, the organization conducts health screenings, referral resources, and health education events at local community health fairs, festivals, and religious institutions across the greater Los Angeles area. And this section kind of goes more into depth about the importance of health screenings and how regular access to and conduction of health screenings are a key strategy in the prevention of disease in public health. And because APA targets mostly elderly AANHPI communities, which includes Asians, Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, and Pacific Islander Americans, it's important to provide the bigger picture of this large and diverse population with respect to how APA provides services to them. So here is just a quick background of the APA methodology and how we conduct our health fairs. So APA is divided into 5 main committees. And here are just some pictures of some of the past health fairs we have done with our clients that we have served throughout the greater Los Angeles area. And so essentially we host free health screenings and we provide linguistically tailored health seminars, and we have undergraduates act as client navigators who guide health fair clients through client intake forms and baseline health screening processes, such as taking BMI, body fat, and waist and hip ratio. And we also have medical faculty and UCLA medical nursing students on site to measure clients' blood pressure and provide health consulting. And so this kind of gives a brief outline of the process of a traditional health fair and how it goes from an intake form, gathering socioeconomic and demographic data about each patient, and going through the health screening process, as well as providing consultations and questions by the medical and nursing students. We also provide each client with health resources, such as health education packets, and provide referral resources in order to connect clients with local community clinics. And here's a link to the APA Healthcare website for more information if you ever want to explore. And so going back into providing that bigger picture of the large and diverse AAPI population, this section sort of just talks about the census data that goes along with the Asian population across the US, and also diving deeper into how Southern California, particularly the San Gabriel Valley, is home to one of the largest, probably the largest Asian and Pacific Islander ethnic groups in America. And it's also important to understand why these populations are at higher risk than others with respect to accessing and utilizing health services. And some of these barriers include cultural and linguistic barriers, stigma against mental health, and increased hate crimes, especially throughout the past years, and underrepresentation in research and health studies. Because AAPI groups are such a large and diverse group, and a lot of research and health studies sort of overlook this large group and do not disaggregate groups based on different ethnicities. And so this is a valuable resource that I had found made by the AAPI data organization, and it's made public so anyone can go and explore. But I just found it really interesting that they kind of show the distribution of Asian Pacific Islander ethnic groups all throughout LA County by language and by census tracts as well. So now I'd like to highlight how GIS plays into the topic of health with APA with regards to this capstone project. So this big goal of this project was to demonstrate how GIS applications can act as powerful tools for improving community health outreach strategies, which is, again, a particularly important step in the primary prevention of disease and public health. I mostly used a combination of different web applications to build this project, but I mainly focused on using ArcGIS Business Analyst, Story Maps, ArcGIS Online, and ArcGIS Pro, while also including future work that would implement Survey 123, dashboards, and Experience Builder. The development of this project involved a lot of time just trying to understand the geographic patterns and inequities in health service access with the populations that APA serves, and to plan a seamless narrative of this project from both APA's and the general public standpoint. And to do this with guidance from my mentor, I led touch-base meetings with members of APA leadership and worked with them to evaluate their priorities if they were to implement GIS into their current workflow. So through this project, I wanted to help APA members and leadership achieve a clearer visual understanding of their work at the population level and identify where health service gaps or potential opportunities for collaboration may exist in local communities, as well as gain a more holistic understanding of the population being served when hosting their health screening fairs. I also wanted to show how APA can combine past health fair data results with GIS to help better prepare for health fairs in terms of resources, such as having an estimated number of medical students, medical professionals, and language-specific client navigators, which are the roles of those undergraduate students that may be needed on site. And so by doing this, I aim to help APA kind of restructure and reframe the way that they approach their health fairs, and to add a geographical and demographic focused perspective, and these questions embody those perspectives to their current workflow on top of their current approaches to finding health fairs based on, say, a simple Google search or revisiting past health fair sites. So now I would like to take you through a scenario where APA would use GIS for deciding a potential site for health fairs, whether that be a new site or one that has not been revisited in the last 5 years. So shown here is a list of factors that categorize an at-risk population with respect to APA's target population and health access characteristics. And these include the elderly, especially those who are 65 years and above, health insurance coverage, whether or not they are covered by any health insurance or if they are undocumented immigrants, language barriers, and particularly those who speak no English or who have low English proficiency, and access to a regular doctor, whether or not someone owns or drives a personal vehicle, and income levels, whether they are below poverty levels or considered low income. And so the following series of interactive maps, which can be further explored by clicking on each data point, were created based on a few of these at-risk characteristics to gain a more holistic census level picture of the population demographics that APA wants to serve. I also created, I created this map that shows the distribution of AAPI adults who are 20 to 64 years old across the greater Los Angeles area. And you can click on each point to show the census tract and more information about that population within that census tract. And this slider map shows the distributions and highlighted concentrations of the AAPI elderly, those who are 65 years and above. And these show the concentrations of those populations. And this map shows, just wants to emphasize and highlight those heavy concentrations in the greater LA area. And so, as you can see, it's mostly concentrated in the San Gabriel Valley region. And these maps show other at-risk contributors, which include the AAPI elderly household owners that have no vehicles. So this legend will tell you that the bright red dots are areas with higher percentage of these kinds of populations. And this map shows AAPI elderly households that are below the poverty level based on a percentage, with brighter dots showing the higher percentage areas. And so I also created a map with existing community centers and religious institutions across the greater Los Angeles area, which would act as potential sites for APA's next health fair. So next, I used Esri's ArcGIS Business Analyst, or BA Web for short, to perform a site suitability analysis that combines curated demographic and census data with the potential healthcare sites that were previously identified. I chose 4 candidate sites for demonstration purposes and created drive time bands of 5 and 10 minutes around each site, as you can see by these. So the red is the 5-minute drive time bands, and the green is the 10-minute drive time bands. Then I performed a weighted suitability analysis using BA Web that ranks each candidate site and its surrounding areas at the census tract level based on the following criteria. So tracts that are comprised of at least 20% AAPI populations, tracts that are comprised of at least 20% of the population being 65 years and older, tracts comprised of at least 15% of the population who are 65 years and above with no health insurance, tracts comprised of at least 15% of the population 65 years and above who speak an Asian Pacific Islander language but do not speak English well, and tracts of the same characteristics as the previous tract but who speak an API language and speak little to no English at all, and tracts comprised of at least 15% of household incomes below 50K. So the resulting scores of the weighted suitability analysis for both the 5 and 10-minute drive time bands are showed in the images here, as well as in this external link. Let me just move this. This external link that BA Web generates for you for each site. And in both drive time bands and among the other candidates, the Shilai Buddhist Temple in Hacienda Heights, which was one of the 4 candidate sites that I chose, ranked the highest based on the previous criteria. And this indicates that it would be an ideal location for APA to host a health screening event there. And also, GIS web applications like BA Web and dashboards can be configured together to provide an even more enriched picture of the population's profile by using interactive infographics. And this infographic shows the latest, if it loads, Here's an external link to those infographics, but this infographic shows the latest community outreach profile for these populations within 5 to 10 minute driving time from each of APA's health fair. And some of this information includes the population's social media usage, job types, marketing profile, and languages spoken at home. And other infographic templates can be configured to show different types of data. So for instance, this one shows health insurance and healthcare statistics for the same populations of each health fair. And you can also change and see for different health fairs, the different statistics that go with that area. And another example of these infographics that was made for the Shilai Temple in particular provides a more detailed snapshot of the population in terms of age profile, poverty levels, school enrollment, health insurance coverage type, and at-risk population statistics. Apologies for the slow rendering. Sometimes it takes a while to load the data in, but there we go. And this shows those types of information that are associated with those drive time bands that we generated with the BA Web suitability analysis. And so going back to the story map, so with these GIS tools and with these data-rich tools, I hope to continue to implement these next step ideas for APA to bring new knowledge and spatial awareness into health organizations' community outreach strategies. So one of the next steps I plan for APA is to create a new and revised version of their current referrals clinic map. Right now, it's a very code-heavy language environment that is not very accessible to users, both inside APA and for people in the health fairs. And so I want to take this moment to kind of go on the back end and make it accessible and usable for us to use during health fairs. And this would show different referral clinics, different clinics that we APA partners with that we can refer our clients to after each health fair screening. I also am in the process of creating a health fair access survey that would collect more geographic focus data from clients who attend the health fairs, such as how do they get to the health fair, and what transportation methods, how do they hear about the health fair. And these kinds of data are really important in assessing the ways that we can improve outreach strategies to our population of interest. And so this is just an example of the form. I have to fill it out, but an example of the form that would be made for this APA's purposes. And I'm also in the process of creating a health fair dashboard that would just help APA leadership and members get a better visual of their impact, the impact of their work on a larger population level. And it would show all the different health fair data that has been compiled together into one dashboard view. And the story map also includes a section for APA mental health. And it was an original idea for this Capstone project. However, accessing mental health data with regards to GIS was a little challenging. And there's a lot of underreporting with mental health that was a limiting factor. But I just felt the need to include this into this project because it was such a pertinent topic, and it still is a pertinent topic in this society. And so that concludes this Capstone project. I will be sure to provide this link, which is made public for you all to explore. And I really hope that this can kind of give you a sense of how GIS can be used in community health. And hopefully you guys can take something away from this. And please let me know if you have any questions at any point. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Wonderful presentation. So if there's any questions or comments, go ahead and put them in the chat. And maybe for today, we'll just go ahead and move forward and hold all of those questions until the end, and go ahead and let our next speaker go. So Bailey, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, we can go ahead and you can take it from there.
Sure. Let me see what I'm doing here. Share screen. I apologize. I need to set really fast. I should have done this ahead of time. I think I might swap to my other laptop just so that I can share my screen, because you don't want to see my face, you want to see what I'm presenting on. So
okay, that sounds good.
Be right there. I apologize for the delay. I'll be 20 seconds.
No worries. So yeah, and Heather has posted the link in the chat, which I think is a phenomenal, I think that's a really great project. Heather, and I have questions, but I'll hold off until the end. So while we wait for Bailey to join us again.
Hello again. Sorry about the delay.
Hi, Bailey. We can hear you. Perfect. No worries.
Perfect. So as soon as I'm able to share my screen, I will do so.
I think Carlos can help make sure that you're a co-host here.
There we go.
Should be, yep, should be able to share now.
Got it. All sorted. Slideshow.
And we see, yep.
Move my speaker notes so that I can actually read them.
Oh, Bailey, hold on. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we should be good.
Yep, we can see it.
Looks good.
Perfect. Well, hello, everyone. Sorry for the delay. It's an honor to be here, and I'm showing off some of the work that we've been doing for a few years by this point. I worked on this for my capstone project about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, and we're fleshing it out to some of the peaks of the future work that we listed at that point. So it's really exciting to still be here and presenting on some of it. Today, I'm going to be presenting our GeoAct Gateway. So GeoAct being an acronym for Geospatial Agent-Based Model for COVID-19 transmission. We built it back in September of 2020 in order to try and help some schools evaluate the different intervention methods that they could use to help keep students safe. And I'm going to go into more detail with that as we keep going. So on behalf of all of the amazing people listed here, thank you for listening. So what's the problem? The problem that we initially faced, and one of the most significant problems that arose due to COVID, which was present both initially and today, regarded an understanding of how to best safeguard children while they're within in-person environments, such as in classrooms, in school buses, or potentially indoor lunchrooms, these kinds of areas, to help both schools themselves and parents and teachers have an understanding of the impact of the different intervention methods. So pharmaceutical intervention methods being referred to as PIs, and non-pharmaceutical methods being referred to as NPIs, as listed here. PIs being interventions like vaccination and testing methods, and non-pharmaceutical being along the lines of requiring the students wear different masks, or keeping them at specific distances away from one another, or more physical intervention methods without resorting to pharmaceutical methods. So very relatively simple concept. So how can we help schools prepare, really? We can simulate their plans in advance. We can determine which activities and what kinds of school areas are conduits of transmission, which areas of the school, what elements of interacting with the school and other students at the school will cause the students to interact with one another and spread the disease to both one another and to various agents within the enclosed environments, and to spread them between different classrooms. And the last most important method is to evaluate which interventions will work best for a given school with a specific map and specific agent setups and their calendar, within their zip code, within all of the demographic data that is based around their area. So in addition to evaluating which intervention methods will work, we focus specifically on the relative impact of closely related intervention methods. And for example, with mask wearing, what the intervention method, what the difference is between wearing none or wearing half the people are wearing them or everybody's wearing them, et cetera, et cetera. So we put this model within a modeling portal in Eravata, which is stored at this link here. If you want to take an access to it, we're going through a few updates right now to implement the computational fluid dynamic model of aerosol, which is one of the more complicated parts of the future work, but it's coming together. So it's really exciting to do so. So if you want to sign up and see what's going on there, log in and send us an email. The parameters that can be explored through this kind of stuff is the various mask types or different efficacy ratings, including whether or not people are wearing them and whether or not they're using them correctly. Testing policies along the lines of, do you test people when they have symptoms or even at all? Do you test them weekly, etc.? The infection severity, all the way including the different variants and how that interacts with the viral load that's emitted by different students and how that interacts with different levels of vaccination and from which brands and so on and so forth. The parameters involving ventilation and how the aerosol model of COVID blows viral load around the room and whether or not the relative risk to different students sitting in various locations, depending on where the initially infected students are, and so on and so forth. So various other parameters that can be interacted with and compared within the simulations here. This is the landing page with a couple bits more information if you're curious about more. Here's a dashboard that's also included in that front page, including a lot of GIS information. It groups a lot of the code data that we have from the county services by zip code. It also it keeps track of the rolling average % of positive cases, and also the count of the rolling average, the rolling average count of cases, which is what is shown in this heat map here, and that is, as I believe, last updated October. Yeah, so earlier this month. In addition, we also display various different health-related impacts and in the different school districts, and so you can see the different impacts of various demographic effects that those have on the community transmission methods included in the model. I'm going to read through the chat very briefly. Thank you. Thank you for providing the link. I'll provide the slides at the end of the presentation, but until then, I'm going to go through here. If you have any questions, I'll read through the chat at the end. Cool. And back here. So using the gateway, there's 3 steps to it. Initially, the file editor allows you to upload and submit your own setup files. So when I was talking earlier about the map file, the agents, the calendar, and the schedule, those are modeled very closely off of what schools themselves will already have in terms of lists of students and the calendars and schedules that they have for keeping track of their own internal data. So those can be relatively easily translated into formats for setting up the simulations here in terms of simulating both events that could have happened in the past and also plans for the future, all the way back through the beginning of COVID, or at least the beginning of 2020. The second step here is actually on the right. It's sorted alphabetically by reasons out of my control. The simulations here is for running specifically focused experiments on, for example, just mask compliance and effectiveness, and comparing the different levels of feature importance for the different related parameters for the experiment focus. So for example, for the mask compliance and effectiveness focus, the 2 parameters specifically focused on are the different levels of successful mask usage rate, which can range anywhere from 0% to 100, and the different types of masks, which is along the lines of there's no masks being worn, or cloth, or N95, and so on and so forth. All of the models require the setup files to be included, but if none of them are, or if any of them aren't, it'll default to using an example school, which is going to be the one that we show you in the next slide. And here, if it loads, is an example school simulation of, it's a video example of the simulation of a school in action. From the initially infected agents, which are shown in red, you can see that the other agents are infected based on the size of the room, the number of infected agents sharing that room, and the severity of their infections as well. So this example specifically has students intermingling at lunchtimes during these shared areas with specifically consistent groups to simulate having friends that are interacting across classrooms. And as a result, in worst case scenarios, this causes spread like you can see here. So starting at the beginning, if we go all the way back to the beginning of it. I pressed back. I'm used to YouTube. So if we watch the full video from the start, you can see that there's only a few initially infected students, and very quickly it gets out of control. The increasing color of the room is due to the default aerosol model being a well-mixed room, which by default assumes that any of the emitted air is evenly distributed around the room almost instantaneously. And so while that has its flaws as well, that's partly why we implemented both a basic airflow model, which is an assumption of how aerosol models would work back when we initially created this, just so that we would have a dynamic model which could take vent locations in arbitrary places and blow air around the room, so that students that were closer to the vent and perhaps further away from the infected student in the window would be at less risk than ones directly in the path of where the viral load would be emitted to. And as a result, there's a basic airflow model, there's the well-mixed room model, which is shown here, which is with the rooms heating up evenly, and there's a CFD model, which is currently under development. So here's a bus model, an example of what we did with the parameters is that the parameters that can be varied are similar, but by default they account for an uneven airflow within the space. The well-mixed room assumption doesn't really account for when the windows are open, which San Diego requires on their buses. You can see in the top left a quick image of a field trip that we took to take a look at the bus themselves and take measurements of the inside of it so that we could build a more accurate assumption of what the inside of it looked like. In addition, I wonder if it plays as a video. It does not. So in the bottom left, you can see various streamers hanging from the ceiling. We did a few experiments with the inside of the bus itself and got some recordings to evaluate how fast the air was moving inside of the bus itself, so that we could determine the ACH within the space itself and how the air would flow towards each student and away from them, etc. And it turns out that it mostly goes down the middle end towards the outside of the windows. It was useful to know specifically how fast, though, or at least relatively how fast. The little heat maps that you can see here are the relative viral load output. It's a heat map of the spread of the viral load over the course of a trip. The area at the top left near the driver's seat is an artifact of using a logarithmic scale to make the map a little bit more readable. But you can see how, from an initially infected student in the bottom left, how the viral load can spread throughout the bus. On the right, you can see one of the other outputs, which compares the relative risk for each of the students given the different intervention methods of keeping the windows down and keeping all of the students masked, or having all of the seats be at the front, or having the windows open or closed. Sorry, having the windows open or closed, having the seats be masked, or having the initially infected students sit at the front or back, or etc. And the little spikes that you can see on the right-hand side are the students sitting directly right next to the infected student. In the bottom middle, the three heat maps you can see are the different seating methods that we had, which are seats, 56 students seated two to each seat, or sitting jigs in the best case scenario of one student per seat with the maximum distance between each student, or in the worst case scenario with the minimum distance between each student. And so here you can see what the difference is between those three. A closer look at what the simulation of the bus looks like in the output example. This heat map shows the distribution of the viral particles at the end of the journey, and it's very closely mapped to how the student seats are on the inside. The dots are a little bit more visible here, but they are in this other version, with the darker dots symbolizing the eventually infected students, or eventually severely exposed, rather. So in addition to the models of in addition to the simulations of the school model and the bus model, we have the e-decision tree that we worked on, which is significant in that it allows for schools to evaluate the impact of the various different intervention methods ahead of time, and to step by step go through both what the plan is for implementing methods in the future, and also justifying why decisions were made in specific events in the past. It's been made in collaboration with various different groups, as you can see here, and here we can see some impacts and little quotes from the impact of where the project has come from. The decision tree was used in various different schools and states. There's been over 80,000 sessions of accessing it and implementing it into the school methods, or using it to justify why decisions were made. And the simulation tool was also useful for specifically Leslie Ray, who said at the end of the quote at the top that it's a useful tool for allowing schools to test plans on pixels rather than specific pupils. We got a lot of positive feedback for the various things here. It's a great tool. It's a fantastic time saver. We also got a lot of constructive and other feedback. And as a brief conclusion, so there's been many thanks to our incredible team and to everyone who's helped out in bringing us this far and has kept the project going, with specific thanks going especially to Ilya, who's the mentor and the lifeblood of the project, and to Stephen, who's been helping me out at the last minute, do all of the presentation stuff. And the more important acknowledgements as well of SGCI, specifically San Diego Health and Human Services Agency, San Diego Unified School District, UCSD School of Medicine, San Diego County Office of Education, Exceed and Access, and NSF support. There's a brief appendix here with the parameter sheet and the model that we're using for infecting students and the age of behavior. And other than that, I think we're briefly open for questions.
Thank you, Bailey. That was an incredible presentation. Are there any comments that we have? Questions? You can go ahead and put those in the chat. I think there is a comment on the constructive and other feedback, sort of always an interesting.
I think it's important to get people's views from all sides of the subject and to entertain all sides of the conversation, even if the people don't necessarily want to put all of their grammar in the right places. I think it's important to listen.
Yep. Yeah. So I have one question, I think, while we still have a few more minutes.
Please.
Right. So you said that it's been focused in San Diego County, and you've had over like 80,000 access points from others. Have you seen sort of certain states or certain districts start to utilize that more readily? Or is it still sort of this random access?
That'll be interesting to look into. We have the data set of people who have accessed it. I haven't made a map of the people who have done so, but I probably will get to that today, actually.
No worries.
I'm kind of curious now.
No, yeah, just curious, right? I mean, of looking at that and seeing if there are certain school districts that are using it or certain states. But have you?
Of course, we got requests from all over the country. And from some states, we got direct requests to implement the decision tree system for them. But the bulk came, of course, from San Diego County. And I should say San Diego Unified, Chula Vista has been quite active. Mostly areas where that e-decision tree was advertised directly to parents. You know, when Omicron started to become a real trouble at the beginning of January of this year, schools did not have enough staff to do contact tracing. So the link to the e-decision tree was sent to parents, and they have been doing that themselves. And some schools and districts were more active in doing that, just forwarding this in newsletters and putting on their websites. From those districts and schools, we certainly get a lot more traffic.
Thanks, Ilya.
Yeah, thanks for helping. The decision tree was mostly done by a few of the other students involved in the project, so I'm giving them my best presentation of it here.
No, that was great. Well, Bailey, and thank you so much for that. And yeah, if there's other questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, or we'll see if we have additional time at the end for questions. But Bailey, thank you. And I guess we'll go ahead and turn it over to our last presenter for this session. Anand, do you want to go ahead and share your screen, and we can take it from there?
Okay. So do I just share screen?
Yes, you should be able to. And Bailey, I don't know if you want to go ahead and stop sharing your screen.
I will. Sorry.
No worries. Nope.
All sorted.
Thank you.
All right. Let me know if you can see my PowerPoint.
Yep. So we can see the full PowerPoint.
Wonderful. Greetings from Eastern Side. Thank you for the opportunity, and I just want to touch base a new GIS method I discovered, and I thought I would share with the group. Okay. No disclosures. I'm a faculty at Children's at George Washington, and you can see DC Children's Hospital is somewhere here, and we have an emergency department. One more here.
And we're still seeing the full presentation. I didn't know if you wanted to put it in presenter view, whatever you're most comfortable with. I just wanted to let you know what we were seeing.
Okay, let me switch the screen to. Is it full screen now?
No, we see your speaker notes now.
Okay.
And if you want to, you do whatever is most comfortable with you in terms of sharing that.
Okay, I'm just going to try this screen, and you let me know if you are seeing.
Still your speaker notes.
Okay, that's fine. It's
okay.
I think if you go to display settings at the top, there's a left a little bit. Just right. I think if there you can swap. And that will switch between the presenter view and the slideshow.
No.
No. Zoom and PowerPoints are always a fun time, so don't worry. Then I'd go ahead and take over.
Thanks for trying. I appreciate it. The motivation is we published pediatric children with asthma who came to emergency room visits, and we looked at the various socio-demographic factors, and apparently the southeast part of DC, you can see the bigger size bubbles showing ED encounters on the backdrop of quintiles of both violence and adult education less than high school were statistically significant. And so this is just a distribution of the violence and education and overlaid with the ED encounters. So to give us idea that DC has got more disparity in the more southeast part of the district. So we are all aware of air pollution, its effect on health. DC children are long-term exposure to various major roadways, Superfund sites. I think there are 25 of them, and industrial and business hazard materials. They have effect on various body system. This is a choropleth map of exclusively looking at the PM 2.5 attributable risk on adult outcomes. All-cause mortality was all not that significant, and ischemic heart disease to some extent. To the darker color is more is the higher rates of outcomes. And asthma in adults, as you can see, the southeast part is still a higher hit rate, and so does the COPD, lung cancer, and stroke. We don't have a pediatric data on this. So I took the machine learning two parts. One is the supervised machine learning, which is a random forest and has its advantages. And the ArcGIS Pro had the spatially constrained multivariate clustering. This is unsupervised. Here we label and give the data. Here it's it takes all the data by itself, looks for natural clustering of the data. And we saw that asthma has a geographical context, and it made sense to look spatially. So it's similar to hotspot, looking at spatial autocorrelation, but it looks at the complexity of both the clusters and the attribute data. So we had about 19 predictors to study. Oops, sorry. So this is the clips of various pieces of the ArcGIS Pro. Most important thing is projection. Projection of map is important. Otherwise, limited by the caudal distances beyond 30 degrees. It's very intuitive to fill in the input feature as a point or a polygon layer. And then the analysis field is your predictor variables. And here we chose the top 10 features from the random forest and applied into the spatially constrained multivariate cluster. Yeah.
Anand, I have a question. Should the slides be advancing? We're still seeing just sort of the social determinants of ED visits.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
DC. Let's go back to your PowerPoint presentation and there's one, I think I've had this happen with others. So exit out of your screen share and share where we see the full PowerPoint.
Okay. So sorry.
No, that's okay. And yeah, I think, not sure. And we also had a comment come in as well. There's also a button down at the bottom where you did presenter view. One to the left shows sort of like a little book icon all the way to the right.
Okay.
That one, and that will sort of give, yeah, if you.
Is this good?
Yeah, I think we can see now the full screen.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. I learned something. Apologies again. So let me fast forward. So we had experience of studying the ED visits and the backdrop of violence at census tract level and adult education less than high school at census tract level, and the bigger bubbles shows the bigger value of ED encounters. We learned that for these two variables, the southeast of DC were a significant hit for pediatric asthma. Air pollution has got health effects of major systems in the body, and DC children are constantly exposed to various elements of environmental hazards. Here's an example of adult study, PM 2.5 as a risk factor for all-cause mortality in adults, ischemic heart disease. The purple is more darker and there's a higher rate of risks. Asthma southeast of DC is significant, and so does COPD, lung cancer, and stroke. So it gives you a sense how air pollution, one of the air pollutant, can be a significant factor in health. So we took machine learning for the pediatric study. Random forest comes with an advantages of overcoming the challenges of linear regression. And ArcGIS Pro has this spatially constrained multivariate clustering, which is unsupervised, and it can do clustering of the data, taking into complexity of the clusters and the attribute data. As a first step, loading the information, the input feature takes the point feature or the polygon feature, and the analysis field where we enter the predictors. And in this particular study, we took the top 10 predictors from the random forest and the cluster size constraint. So this is spatially constrained, so we can limit the cluster size or we can leave it none, and the software does the pseudo R square and chooses the number of clusters. So it could be a trial and error method here. And spatially constrained has got options, and if it's point polygon, it's usually Delaunay triangulation is default. Here we use edges and corners, so the polygons it shares the either the edges or the vertex of the polygon. Membership probability, I'll get to it. And I think to start with the first analysis, you choose first a feature and then you try different permutations once you know what the number of clusters work out. So if I choose none for the cluster size, it does the pseudo F statistics, and we can see the number 2 clusters has got the highest value, and that's what the software did. And For the ED visit, we had the color can change based on how many times you repeat the software, but essentially it will switch between blue and red for 2 clusters. So it gives the counts of number of features. There were 161 census tract that we included in the analysis, and it gives the breakdown of counts for one cluster and the other cluster. So the distribution membership probability is a statistical way of analyzing how each feature contributes to the cluster, and when that's where the permutation can be either 200, 500, or 1,000. I think we ended up doing 1,000, but it didn't make a difference between 500 and 1,000. So when I highlight the 90% probability, it gives us the correlation to the areas in the DC where the features are highly representative. So these are the few features for the spatially constrained multivariate clustering. And the results section also has got various variables and R squares. The R square, higher the R square is the one that gives more discriminating value to the cluster, but of course every variable contributes to the cluster feature. So when we ran the random forest for the at-risk population of asthma, and the top where predictors, the minority status, the air pollutant, particulate matter 2.5, and public insurance were percolating to the top, while anything that's age and below tend to be having less importance. So we took that first 10. Most of them are actually air pollutant, and I will walk you through the different other expansions of those things. So this is the graphical output of the spatially constrained multivariate clustering. And I want your eyes on the right side here, the high ED visit and low ED visit. So this is the median line that connects the high values for the various predictors. So one can see public insurance, Superfund site, minority status, low income, and adults with less education. They were all falling with the higher ED visits, and converse of that, the low ED visit have a variable, different variables that are low yield. So if to put the two pictures together, so we have the factors identified from the random forest. We have minority status, the public insurance, low income, adult education were on the top variable importance, and spatially constrained multivariate analysis, taking that geographic context, the spatial constraint, it was still able to highlight the same factors or the predictors, although there might be a little difference in the ranking, but it doesn't do the ranking part, but we can pretty much measure the mean values, and we can put them in order. So essentially, both the methods identified similar predictors, and although with the different orders, it is not concerning to me. And what I'm learning is it's two different perspectives of understanding the predictors and responses for the data. Thank you for listening. That's all I have.
Thank you, Anand. That was another phenomenal presentation. So any questions that anyone has, or comments that people have for Anand or for any of our speakers?
I can stop sharing at the moment.
I think you have stopped sharing, Anand, so you're good on that front.
Okay, thanks.
So I guess, sort of going off of your presentation, based on sort of what you've discovered between the SCMC and the RF, does that have an impact on how you sort of move forward with some of the analyses?
That is a good question. So the power of the GIS SCMC will take me to the next step of narrowing down from the 10 variable predictors to more meaningful and feasible values. And I will be able to run with a restricted number of predictors and able to local. That's the advantage of this spatially constrained. We will be able to find pockets of census tracts that are at a higher risk for asthma, and it helps making local agencies and policies to help those communities. So that's what I think is the next step in this research.
Thank you. So there is a question in the chat from Ilya. How correlated are the predictors? Do you have a pair plot?
Is there correlation between the ED visit and the predictors? I'm sorry, I'm trying to get the question.
Ilya, if you want to take off your mic, you can, among the predictors.
While I'm thinking loud, we did a correlation plot, and between the outcome and the predictors, and there are pretty good predictors by Spearman correlation, but the problem is with the 19 variables, we were running into multicollinearity. Unlike the previous study where we were able to do multiple linear regression, here the challenges were because of the size and the numbers and number of variables and the multicollinearity. We had to go for a machine learning, and we were comparing the outcomes with lasso regression and also with XGBoost, and we almost had similar results. I hope I answered if there were correlation with predictors and the outcome, but the challenge was there were multicollinearity.
Yes, thank you. That's essentially what I was asking. There's a sample project at Esri that looks at predicting asthma rates for Connecticut. And we went through several iterations of that model setup. And several steps involved removing some predictors because they were highly correlated with others. So essentially, you would double count certain variables, which is not good. But another thing is that if you do the prediction with scikit-learn versus where you can do all sorts of boosting and other things, versus using Esri tools for prediction, which could take into account spatial variables, including raster variables. In your experience, what would give you better accuracy, including rasters or experimenting with different types of boosting?
I don't know the answer, honestly. I have not worked with raster, so I would not be able to answer that question.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I do have one more for Heather real quick, and thinking is APA interested in sort of utilizing your results that you've discovered and sort of helping their health fairs? Are they looking forward to some of your results and sort of implementing what you've discovered?
Yeah, so I have been discussing with them, and they they're thinking of implementing at least the referral clinic map that I am in the process of creating for them. And so we just have to work out a few more details. There's a lot of like obstacles that are still in the mix, just because a lot of our clients' data are tied to HIPAA, which is the patient protection privacy. And so that's why there were some ideas that I had in mind for this capstone project regarding taking client data, or at least demographic data, and putting it onto, say, the dashboards, or trying to map out these health aspects. But a lot of those patient privacy obstacles come into play. And so even with the health fairs as well, we just have to make sure, just because not everything is so secure on the web. And so, but they are planning to implement some GIS approaches, just because right now we go on a case-by-case basis, health fair by health fair, or patient by patient. Coming with a geographic perspective would be a fresh perspective for them.
That's great to hear. That's great. Okay, well, thank you all for joining our session, GIS and Health. I think that wraps it up, and we're just a minute over, so I apologize if we're entering into anyone's time. But in the Slack, we'll get our next session is at 1 o'clock, so go ahead and check that out. I believe it is GIS and planetary health. So that's online, and we'll look forward to seeing you all later this afternoon. Enjoy, everyone.